What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here. Back again talking college football. And today we are talking week 8, the leftover games. We have our marquee show already on the channel if you'd like to see that. This will focus mostly on your requests. But if you're looking for the big games, that is already available. And if you ever have requests, please leave them in the comments, including our recap show. We added that this week. So if you want to hear about something after the fact, you can request games there as well. If you do like the show, please consider subscribing or leaving a like. Those help a small channel like this a ton. So thank you if you have done that. And last thing, if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. My goal is to try to make better time. So let's dive in. Oregon takes on Rutgers. Oregon is a 17-point favorite. The total in this game currently sits at 60.5 points. We took an over at 59.5. Still shows some value on the over at 60.5. The pace in this game is about average. Both teams slightly above. Resume-wise, we've seen Oregon play 4 weak teams, 3 depending on what you think of Northwestern. They slaughtered all of them. They have the win over Penn State in overtime, which has aged poorly since the Penn State collapse. And then they lose to Indiana last week, which it was a rightful loss. Indiana soundly beat them. The only real errors in the game, Oregon did miss a field goal, but Indiana threw a pick 6. The rest of the turnovers came towards the end of the game with Oregon trying to claw their way back. For Rutgers, this team has 3 wins over, 2 MAC schools, Ohio and Miami, Ohio, and then an FCS team in Norfolk State. In Big Ten play, they've lost to Iowa 38-28, Minnesota 31-28, and Washington 38-19. They've allowed 30 points in every Big Ten game so far. Last week, they allowed 10.5 yards per play to Washington. That is a first down on average every time Washington ran a play. Now, Rutgers didn't do themselves any favors. They had a lot of opportunities in this game. Honestly, so did Washington, who missed a field goal. But Rutgers had a missed field goal themselves. They had a turnover on down at the Washington 6, another turnover on down at the Washington 11, and an interception at the Washington 4. Yes, you got it. That is 3 red zone turnovers and a missed field goal. But in this contest, we know Rutgers has the worst defense in the Big Ten. They are 134th, and it's not just what they did against Washington. They allowed 10.3 yards per pass to Mark Granowski for Iowa. This unit is dreadful, and it makes sense. They lost their DC, who's the head coach at UMass now. Can Oregon move the ball? I think the answer is emphatically yes. Dante Morris had an excellent season, 72% completion percentage for him, only 4 turnover-worthy plays. The offensive line is just fine. Pressure rate is 25%. We saw them beat up by Indiana, and it was mainly those G5 transfers, Alex Harkey and Isaiah World, that got beat. But they've done a fantastic job against everyone else. They held up against Penn State. This is likely a good offensive line, not an elite unit, but they're good enough to beat Rutgers. And then the skill players. I wish they had a little bit more. Love DeCorian Moore, this freshman 5-star. He's awesome. But Malik Benson, cast off from multiple programs now. Gary Bryant, sort of an underachieving veteran, our year 2 and year 3. Kenyon Sadiq is 225 yards. He hasn't quite been as involved as I thought he would be. Our consensus number 1 tight end in the NFL draft mock ranking community. He hasn't quite done that, but it's a good skill position group. I would hesitate to say it's great. The run game's going to use 4 backs. They're balanced, and they're all very good. So, they should score as many points as they want to on this Rutgers defense. Can Rutgers return the favor? Probably not to the same extent. There is a mismatch in this game in favor of Oregon defensively. Rutgers' offensive line is a solid Big Ten unit. However, I question their pass blocking, especially their tackles. Taj White and Tyler Needham have been weak at times. They've only played one really good defensive line. It was Iowa, who pressured Ethan Kaliak-Manis 18 times. You can get pressure on these tackles, and where does the Oregon defense succeed? They have good edge rushers. Tatum Tuodi and Mateo Uagalele are elite edge rushers, and they have an advantage over these tackles. If you want to beat the Oregon defense, I think you need to pass protect long enough, so I'm curious to see how Rutgers treats this. There are weaknesses to the defense, though, if you can protect long enough, especially that right cornerback spot. They have not found an answer to this. Darren Johnson, Lolea, Obadegwu, those are the players they've been rotating there. They had 3 players out there rotating against Indiana, and Rutgers has the receivers to do this. KJ Dolphy, big 6'6" receiver. Ian Strong is 537 yards. DT Sheffield, 394. Not to mention Kaliak-Manis is having a good season overall. Best of his career. If he can be kept clean. They can throw the ball over the top of you. The problem is he's not always kept clean, and he's taken 19 sacks. Otherwise, can Rutgers run the ball? They'll probably have some success here. Antoine Rabin's been a completely fine running back. They're 43rd in rushing efficiency. And we don't need them to score 40 points themselves. Oregon has to do that, yes. But if Rutgers gets to 21, you're looking at an over coming in here. So we still show value on this. We'll play an over in this game, and we currently have 59.5. Remaining in the Big Ten, Washington takes on Michigan. Speaking of Washington just beating up on Rutgers, last time we saw them, get a tougher test here, probably their toughest test of the year. They played Ohio State already. So definitely not their toughest test of the year, but second toughest. Speaking on that, a really weak schedule so far. In non-con, you played Colorado State, UC Davis, and Washington State. All those were blowout wins. They beat Maryland by 4 points. That was a greasy game. They had to overcome a 20-0 deficit. And then they beat Rutgers, who couldn't stop a nosebleed. In between all that, Ohio State demolished this team 24-6. For Michigan, this team has been up and down. Their wins include New Mexico, Central Michigan, Nebraska by 3 points, and then Wisconsin 24-10. They have losses in between to Oklahoma 24-13, and their most recent loss to USC 31-13 was particularly troubling, considering USC had some plays in that game where they probably should have done a little bit better. They had a fumble at the Michigan 29. Now, Michigan threw an interception right back at their own 15. So that wasn't great. And the second Michigan interception came to end the game. So that wasn't really too impactful. But the real difference in that contest that I think teams might try to do against Michigan, USC is typically running a lot of nickel. They just didn't in this past game. They played 3 linebackers every play. They dared Michigan and Bryce Underwood to throw the ball. They had some success. They did not have enough. Michigan failed the test and lost to USC. And in this contest, can they have enough success against Washington? Well, believe it or not, the Washington defense is worse than USC's by a pretty wide margin. I don't know if they have the personnel to take that same approach and try to play 3 linebackers, not run nickel at all against this Michigan offense. They're just so hurt on defense. Jacob Manu, who returned from injury, he missed their last game again. They lost Al Ukthat, linebacker for the year. Durfee on the edge missed their last game. Not to mention when Washington has the ball, they're down their 2 top offensive linemen right now, John Miles and Carver Willis. Both are questionable, and their status is in doubt for this game. Michigan, really just Justice Haynes. We'll see if he plays, but they have a capable backup in Jordan Marshall, so that's not even that impactful. But Washington's been walking wounded. I don't think they have the personnel to take a similar approach to USC, and they definitely don't have the talent. In the secondary especially, this team is 86th. Up front, they're 87th. The total defense is 95th. They've given up a lot of production, and we mentioned it. They have not faced a lot of good offenses. Previously talked about the Rutgers team who had 3 turnovers in the red zone. Like, some of their box scores look good at the end of the day, at least overall margin of victory. But this could have been a lot worse in some of these contests. I think Michigan moves the ball, even with their struggles. Bryce Underwood, his completion percentage is 60%. They've made some changes to the offense. First of all, he doesn't really have a lot of turnover-worthy plays. He has 4 of them, and he's only taken 7 sacks. The problem, honestly, has been the drops. This team is towards the top of the country in drop rate, 13.2%. They've started to make some shifts in their receiving rotation. You are seeing less Samaj Morgan, thank goodness, more 4-star freshman Andrew Marshall. Hopefully that benefits them in the long term because McCulley's been awesome. They need to play a little less Bredesen. I hope that helps. They got back El Hadi, so maybe he's a guard, but maybe that helps their offensive line overall, and they don't have to play as much 12 personnel and use the tight end to block. Their offensive line's been fine anyway. They're 32nd in pass blocking, 37th in run blocking. All this to say, Michigan should do their part in this game. An offense that's playing a little bit faster than you might think at 87th. Then on the other side, can Washington do their part and score? Well, first of all, Michigan's defense is probably going to be the best one they face this season outside of that Ohio State contest. And there is a gap between Ohio State and Michigan without question. Damon Williams has had an excellent season. 74% completion, 10.3 yards per attempt, 7 big-time throws, 0 turnover-worthy plays. The biggest concern in this game is the offensive line. This unit is poor. They have the 2 injuries. And they currently are allowing a 39.5% pressure rate, which honestly, Damon Williams taking 15 sacks, that raw number seems high. It should be higher. He's doing a good job in the pocket. That's the concern. Michigan's defense is imbalanced. Their best unit is up front, barring the pass rush. They're 6th in run defense, 46th in pass rush. So really, that is the advantage that they have on defense, because their coverage is 50th, or perhaps there's room for growth with like Rod Moore's back and he's starting now. But if you can pass protect long enough, if you're Washington, this Michigan defense may have their hands full. Denzel Boston is a very difficult receiver to cover. Jonah Coleman is an excellent threat in the run game, not to mention what Damon Williams does himself in this contest. So with the Washington defense being so poor, Michigan showing enough cracks, this should be a game that we see some points put up. And the total right now is 50.5. With this pace, you're looking at something that should come in a little bit higher than this. The number we took was 49.5. We're currently showing a little bit of value towards the over, still at 50.5 in this game. Even with the pacing, the Washington defense struggling, the Michigan defense sort of trailing, and the Washington offense performing, this one should come in as an over. Baylor TCU, exciting Big 12 game. Don't expect a lot of defense. The total is 67 points. TCU is a 3-point favorite over Baylor. Baylor's coming off their bye. TCU, most recently, we saw them against Kansas State losing. More on that in a second. But so far in this contest, Baylor's been up and down this year. They lose to Auburn. That is what it is. They beat SMU in a crazy back-and-forth game that was 48-45. After the FCS win, they lose to Arizona State by 3 points in a game where they had a 69% post-game win expectancy. The only difference in the game is Arizona State had 9 points off turnovers. Baylor had 3 of them. Just can't turn the ball over like that. And since then, this Baylor team beat Oklahoma State and beat Kansas State by 1 point. As far as TCU goes, they have the win over North Carolina that's aged poorly. They beat Abilene Christian. Then they win against SMU. Since then, they lost to Arizona State by 3 points. Another game that they probably should have won. They gave up a 17-point lead. This Arizona State team just winning again this year by the thinnest of margins. Then they beat Colorado, and last week they lose to Kansas State. I mean, they lost the turnover battle 3-0. TCU had a turnover on downs at the Kansas State 20. They had a fumble 6, a pick 6. I mean, just you can't win games when you're doing that stuff. In this contest, yes, we are expecting all offense. Baylor comes in with Sawyer Robertson at quarterback, 64% completion, 8.3 yards per attempt, 15 Big Ten throws, 8 turnover-worthy plays, 9 sacks taken. The offensive line is not fantastic for this team. They're 84th in pass blocking, 26th in run blocking. It's just been a little questionable how we haven't gotten more out of, especially the run game. And it's been a Bryson Washington problem. I know he's been banged up, but they're 108th in rushing efficiency. That's just isolating with the running backs doing yards after contact per attempt, forced missed tackles. Because the run blocking unit comes in 26. That's not the problem for this team. It's just been a little questionable to see them unable to run the ball, but they certainly can throw it with Robertson being an absolute stud there. They have quality receivers, and their injuries come on defense. So I'm expecting this unit to be able to move the ball against TCU's defense, even though it's been a pretty good showing from TCU's defense this year. They're 35th overall. They're 8th in run defense, 29th in pass rush, 54th in coverage. Unfortunately for them, the way you want to beat TCU is throwing the ball over the top. I know they got good safety play in Bud Clark. There's just enough weak links where this is the path of least resistance. What does Baylor want to do to you? They want to throw the ball over the top with those 5 receivers. Michael Trigg is a very unique mismatch in this game. And Baylor's passing at the 12th highest rate in the country. Plus, they're playing 5th in pace. This is going to be a tough ask for TCU's defense. But it's not like it's going to be any easier for Baylor's defense, who hopefully they just get a little healthier. When you look at the injuries in this game, Baylor's linebackers, Phoenix Jackson and Travion Barnes, those are the main injuries. TCU's injuries come on offense. Ryan Hughes on the offensive line and Joseph Manjack at receiver. But even with players like Jackie Marshall back in the fold for Baylor, the main problem is you can just run the ball down this team's throat. They are 84th in run defense, 109th in pass rush. Their defensive line has been a major concern for them this season. TCU prefers to throw the ball, and I still think they'll have success with that game plan, but Baylor is 20th in coverage. For whatever reason, we thought the secondary would be the issue for Baylor this year. That's not been the case. But Hoover, 65% completion percentage, 8.8 yards per pass attempt, 14 big-time throws, 13 turnover-worthy plays. That's the problem with this game. He's also taken 11 sacks. And the offensive line has been much better than expected. His pressure-to-sack ratio is a little high at 21.5%. His receivers also need to play a little bit better. They've dropped 7.5% of his passes. But as far as the rest of the group goes, I do like TCU's skill position players outside of the drops. They're 24th in receiving, which makes sense considering Eric McAllister, Dwyer, and Manjack, when healthy, have been fine. They've been a little banged up throughout the year. They're still not 100% sold in the offensive line, who's just outside the top 60 overall, but they're still rotating guards. Haven't quite settled there. The rushing attack still isn't living up to expectation, but they've gotten back Barnes. They played a couple games without him, and they struggled with him back in the fold, the UTSA transfer. They should have at least more success on the ground, which, again, that's probably the best way to beat Baylor. So they can elevate their rushing attack, throw the ball when needed. They should score some points in this game. But ultimately, this is a talent question. TCU has the better defense by a pretty wide margin. The offenses are similar for the most part. They both play a similar style of football, pass heavy, up tempo, and the difference in total efficiency offensively is just 2 points. It's in the rankings, it's 48 Baylor, 46 TCU. Whereas the defense, it's 35-52. TCU playing at home. We currently make this a little bit wider than the spread, but it is still very close for us, and probably one we will just wait and see where it comes in. To be honest with you, I don't have a real good feel for this game. We make this closer to a -5. We have the total up at 69, so not showing a lot of value either way. This would just be a lean for now unless something happens on the injury report or something else. West Virginia, UCF. This is one I like. Just fading West Virginia, man. I'm surprised UCF is still -7. There's a lot of injury stuff in this game, but the total is 47 points. Nothing on that. But man, I mean, we don't know who is going to play quarterback for West Virginia. What you can say is Nico Marchiol and Jalen Henderson, the top two, are doubtful. Then they listed co-starters for everyone else. I think you're probably going to see Wilkins start this game. He's been atrocious, 45% completion percentage, 7.1 yards per attempt, one big-time throw, one interception. He is mobile. We haven't seen him take a sack yet, which is a miracle because their pressure rate is 37.5%. But he was listed with the OR tag. Scotty Fox Jr.'s played a little bit. We saw him promptly throw some interceptions against Pitt. Max Brown allegedly could be back in this game. We've seen him play a little bit. He's also been a disaster. They're not going to be working with a lot. When you just look across the roster, there's so many injuries for West Virginia. It's derailed their season. On top of Marchiol and Henderson at quarterback, Sincere Bowers, running back, Ty Edwards, running back, Jaheim White, running back, Oren Singleton, receiver, Jaden Bray, receiver, Devin Grant, edge, Ashton Woods, linebacker. This team is just beat up, and it's starting to show in their box scores. They have the win against Pitt. Great win. Pitt should not have played Eli Holstein. They did it to themselves. Since then, blown out to Kansas, blown out to Utah, blown out to BYU. That score looks closer than it was. West Virginia scored at the end of the game to cover the spread. But BYU still wins 38-24. Coming off a bye this week, maybe that really helps them. But we've gotten a report from their injuries. It doesn't appear they're going to be a lot healthier. UCF, meanwhile, they've been healthy outside of quarterback, and last week's hero, Cam Fancher, he's out this week. Ja'Cory Brown is still questionable. He's been questionable for weeks now, but Taven Jackson's not on the injury report, so I'm presuming we get Taven Jackson. He's been the best one of the bunch. It's still not great. 64.5% completion percentage, 7.3 yards per attempt, 4 big-time throws, 7 turnover-worthy plays, but only 1 interception. He's run very hot on the turnover-worthy plays. He's not taking a ton of sacks. And this team has at least been competitive, whereas West Virginia has been getting annihilated. So they beat Jacksonville State and NC A&T. That's not really saying a lot. They crushed North Carolina. They played Kansas State relatively close. That was a game where they lost all their QBs. They lost to Kansas by a touchdown, another close game where UCF did themselves no favors. They fumbled on their own 17 and had a pair of turnover on downs inside the Kansas 25. And last week they lost to Cincinnati 20-11. UCF had 10 penalties in the game. They fumbled at the Cincinnati 45, a couple of midfield turnover on downs, and an overall very sleepy game. But if we could just get decent quarterback play for this team, the defense has been awesome. They're 40th in total defense. We just mentioned a lot of their box scores. It is very hard to score on this defense. They have excellent edge rushers with Nigel Kelly. This was the strength of the team. And their coverage unit is actually coming 27th. The problem is offensively, first of all, the quarterback injuries don't help you, but they don't have any good receivers. Players like Black and Marcus Burke have not lived up to expectation. This is a power run game. And that makes sense with Miles Montgomery, with Jaden Nixon, with an offensive line that's actually pretty decent. They're still rotating both guard spots and their left tackle position, which I don't really understand. But somehow they've still lived up to being a pretty good offensive line. They're 40th in the country in the combined pass blocking and run blocking metrics. So it's not a bad infrastructure for a guy like Taven Jackson. And then you look at the other side. West Virginia is an utter disaster. Part of this is just injuries everywhere. They're 106th in total defense, 128th in coverage. You can definitely throw the ball over this team. And then they're 66th in run defense. That's a little above average, but we're still talking a unit that can be beat on the ground. Then on the other side, can West Virginia move the ball? We highlighted all the strengths of UCF's defense. I mean, we talked about Wilkins being atrocious at quarterback. I don't buy anything they have on their roster at that position. Their receivers are 114th. Their rushing attack is 112. I mean, you lost your best players from both of those units with Bray and White. What are you going to do? Their offensive line is 70th in pass blocking, 129th in run blocking. They're still rotating some of their offensive linemen, but when you look at the efficiency metrics, they're not even playing their best guys. And since they've started rotating players, it looks like the depth pieces might be a little better. Like Tykees Crawford, Kimo Makinole need to be benched. Walter Youngbear's been atrocious. This is a bad offensive line and a major mismatch in favor of the UCF pass rush. We took UCF minus a 7. Honestly, it's hard for me to believe that this has remained parked at this number with how banged up West Virginia is. And the way they play doesn't do them any favors. They're playing at the speed of light. For a team that's at a talent deficit, you're just maximizing the chances of your opponents to put points on the board against you. So we laid the 7, comfortable with this one. Really surprised it hasn't moved. Michigan State, Indiana. I'm laying it with Indiana until they convince me not to. And maybe they should have convinced me not to when Mendoza took that, 30-yard safety against Iowa. I wouldn't have covered with the number I had. It was a 7, but it would have pushed. But instead, they take the wild safety and don't cover. But anyway, that has nothing to do with this game. A lot of injuries for Michigan State. Aiden Childs, he took a shot to the head. I think he'll be back, but it shouldn't really matter. He's been atrocious. A lot of injuries on the offensive line. Stanton Ramel and Christian Phillips. On defense, Nakai Martinez is injured again. We'll see if he plays, but it doesn't look likely. Then Jalen Thompson on the edge. Michigan State's healthy outside of Lee Beebe, who was the third running back for this team. But kind of a mess for Michigan State. They beat Western Michigan, Boston College, which is aged poorly. And they had a 25% post-game win expectancy against there. But since that game, Boston College has quickly, I don't know, man, they might be the worst team in the ACC. And other than that, they beat Youngstown State. Since then, blown out by USC. They had a lot of garbage time production, so don't get fooled by that 31 points. Most of that coming in Q4. They lose to Nebraska 38-27. Same thing there. Not a good game. Michigan State had a punt block for a touchdown. And last week, they got blown out by UCLA 38-13. That is not a good slate of Big Ten opponents. USC is pretty good. Nebraska is middling. And UCLA, I guess maybe you could argue they're better now that they changed coaches. But meanwhile, Indiana beats Old Dominion. The only reason that was so close, a couple turnovers. Kind of a gross game. Otherwise, beat Kennesaw, beat Indiana State, beat down Illinois, beat Iowa in a game we talked about with the safety, and then beat Oregon, a game we also talked about. But it's going to be troubling for Michigan State if Childs can't play. If he can play, it still might be troubling. He's had a bad season for the second year in a row. He's cut down the turnover-worthy plays, but he's still at 6 of them. That is a problem. His sack rate is high. It's 23.5% pressure to sack ratio. When your offensive line is bad, that's where things become especially problematic because they'll hang in the pocket and try to make plays. It's just the offensive line's not protecting him, and then he makes bad decisions when he's under pressure. He'll either take sacks or he'll throw the ball into tight windows with turnovers. And it's not going to be easy against Indiana's defense, who is second in the country overall. You have elite edge rushers like Mikel Kamara. Linebacking room is solid. Wyatt back there. Corners like D'Angelo Pons. Like, it doesn't get easy at any level of the defense beating them. The Michigan State rushing attack is awful. They did a really bad job in the offseason addressing this, bringing in low-level transfers like Tao Tolliver and just relying on incumbents like Frazier. They're 68th in rushing efficiency. It's not good. And the only reason their receiving efficiency is so high is they have a stud in Nick Marsh. You stop one guy in the offense and you're probably winning this game. Indiana has definitive advantages. And then on the other side, Fernando Mendoza, He's playing himself into Heisman consideration. He's playing himself into a very high NFL draft pick. His completion percentage is 70, 9.2 yards per attempt, only 3 turnover-worthy plays, only 6 sacks. The receivers are awesome. When you need a tough yard, Omar Cooper is about as good after the catch as anyone. Elijah Surratt creates space at will. Your run game with Hemby and Black, maybe it's not flashy, but it gets the job done. They're 22nd in rushing efficiency. Their offensive line is top 20 in the country, and they just went against Tatum Tuoti and Mateo Uyagalele and came out just fine. They faced the Iowa defensive line, which is a good unit. They played Illinois, who is a decent D-line. They've answered every call. Michigan State is significantly worse than all of those teams. The only thing you could really point to in this game against Indiana is motivation. I think this team is more motivated than most because of their coach to cover spreads like this. They should have covered against Iowa. They did not because of the weird safety, which was a factor in the game, like the refs messing around and doing some weird stuff that caused them to do that. Generally, I don't like looking at narratives at all. And mathematically, we make this wider, which is why I'm discounting the narrative a little bit. But it's hard not to like Indiana just situationally. There's outs for the spread to move if the quarterback doesn't play for Michigan State. We make this 34. So a little bit of value towards the over. As far as Indiana goes, that means not on the overall over in the game. We actually make that pretty efficient. But let's move on. We're on Indiana. We'll lay the points. We took a 26.5. UNLV Boise State, a game I disagree with the market. I don't feel confident about it, but I do. Spread is 13 points. It's moved in favor of Boise State. I took a bad line on UNLV at plus an 11, I believe, or 11.5. The total is 62. The reason it's moved to Boise State, you'd have to think is just UNLV's defense. When you look at what UNLV's done, they allowed 31 points to Idaho State in the game they won by a touchdown. They allowed 21 points to Sam Houston State. Sam Houston State is the worst team in Conference USA. They allowed 23 points to the first edition of UCLA before they made all the changes. They allowed 38 points to Miami, Ohio in a game they won by 3 points. They allowed 17 to Wyoming and probably their best defensive showing. They win that game with 3 turnovers. And then they beat Air Force 51-48. This team is in consistent shootouts game after game. And the reason they've won a lot of these contests is they have the turnover advantage in basically every single one of them. And that's something that is volatile. So I don't feel good about this. I'm going to pull up the turnovers for each of these first games, the turnover margin. So with Air Force, it's 1-0. With Wyoming, it's 3-1. With Miami, Ohio, it's 3-2. UCLA, it's 2-0. Idaho State, it's 4-1. Sam Houston, it's 1-1. This team is crushing teams in turnover margin. As far as Boise State, I have not been impressed. They lose to USF. They get blown out. Then they play Eastern Washington. That is what it is. They play a shootout against Air Force, 49-37. It's not like they did a much better job against Air Force than UNLV. They beat App State 47-14. App State had 4 turnovers, kind of is what it is. They got slaughtered by Notre Dame, and then they beat New Mexico in a game that should have been closer. New Mexico had 3 turnovers, and that's been a kind of a feather in the cap for Boise, too. In the games they've won, it's been a lot of turnover luck. So who wins the turnover luck in this game? First of all, I think both offenses move the ball. Colin Drea has been just fine for this team, 8.8 yards per attempt through the air, only 4 turnover-worthy plays and 13 sacks. He's been awesome for UNLV. And his skill position players are okay. Jaden Thomas is an excellent rusher. The receivers leave a little bit to be desired, but with Jaden Bradley playing well, they're getting enough out of that group. Their O-line is a bit of a question for me. They're 108th in pass blocking, 49th in run blocking, but I think it's a serviceable unit at the very least. The concern with this team is their defense, and they lost one of their linebackers, Blessing Alulu Tumotu. We'll see if he plays in this game. Wasn't expecting him to miss, but he did. We have this defense a little better than the box scores indicate. 72nd overall. They're putrid against the run, and they're better in coverage. They come in 31st. I tend to believe a lot of that coming in via the turnovers. But overall, defense is a major question. And even against Boise, who has a limited offense, I still think it's a question because Boise, one thing they can do is run the ball. Maddox Madsen it is what it is. He's had a bad season. 61% completion, 11 turnover-worthy plays already. He hasn't taken a lot of sacks, so he's done that well, but he's not working with a lot of receiver. Like Latrell Caples, Chris Marshall, this unit just isn't doing it as far as the pass game goes. When they have to throw the ball, if they're down. We saw that against USF. They just can't do it. However, if they can run the ball on you and play with the lead, they can do that. For some reason, this offensive line is 116th in pass blocking, 27th in run blocking, but they run a trio of running backs right now with Sherrod and Gaines and company. They'll run the ball down your throat. That is an advantage for them against UNLV. However, Boise State's defense is 63rd. They're 104th in run defense, and they're 35th in coverage. This unit is only slightly better than UNLV's in total efficiency, which makes sense when you start to look at some of the data points we have. Yeah, they've held up against certain teams, but they allowed 34 to USF. They allowed 37 to Air Force, 36 to Notre Dame. That should have been worse. And then they played some horrible offenses. I don't buy this defense. And with them being 104th in run defense, expect Jaden Thomas to run the ball here too. This could come down to who has more turnovers. And with that, UNLV to us is a value at plus 13. They're a talented team. Coming into the season, had them power rated ahead of Boise State. We make this inside 13 points. I made it closer to 10, and I'm willing to take it at that number, which I've already done. But you have to be careful with UNLV. This game is a wide range of outcomes. I wouldn't be surprised if UNLV beats Boise State. I also wouldn't be surprised if Boise State runs for 300 yards and wins this game by 3 scores. Volatile contest. We show value on UNLV, but be careful with honestly, with your mental health. If games like this drive you crazy, there's a chance that it'll drive you crazy this week. Southern Miss Louisiana, our very own Southern Miss, they're back on the board, minus 3.5 against Louisiana. Another game I don't really understand. The total's 53. Louisiana has a lot of injuries. Walker Howard at QB has been out since week 1. Zylan Perry, their best running back, he's been out. Shelton Sampson, arguably their best receiver. 2 on their offensive line, and Caden Moreau and George Jackson. Whereas the only player on Southern Miss who's been banged up is Blake Bustard on the offensive line. I don't know what to make of Louisiana, man. This team has been dead to rights without their quarterback. And the only reason they've been competitive in some games, one, it's opponent-driven, and then James Madison, their most recent contest, James Madison had 10 penalties for double the yards, compared to Louisiana's. They had 3 turnovers. A defender fell down on a bomb from Louisiana in that game. James Madison should have won this game by 30 points. Instead, they win by 10. And otherwise, their only win is against Marshall, who's awful, and they had a 32% post-game win expectancy. This team has been dreadful. Southern Miss has at least been competent. They beat Georgia Southern, who's a pretty good Sun Belt team. They beat Jacksonville State, who's a good Conference USA team. Lose to Louisiana Tech. That is what it is. Beat App State. Beat Jackson State, FCS team, and lose to Mississippi State in a respectable fashion. This is a very talented team and one that we show a lot of value on in this game over Louisiana. And it starts with Braylon Braxton, 66% completion, 16 big-time throws, 8 turnover-worthy plays, only taking 8 sacks. He's a real difference maker at quarterback. They have good pass catchers. This is basically the entire Marshall offense. They have a good run game with Pittman. They have a good offensive line, especially pass blocking. They're 24th there. They're 93rd in run blocking, and they've started to make some changes. So they've been playing some players on the offensive line, and now they're rotating 2 positions. Aleali Maui split with Luke Rogers. Cooper Frazier split with Carlos Slayton. Both of those changes have been an upgrade to the offensive line. You're dealing with a good infrastructure for this offense. And Louisiana, for all their problems at quarterback, they have a lot of problems on defense. They're 114th. 122nd in run defense, 99th in pass rush, 79th in coverage. And who is the best offense they've faced? Yeah, they played Missouri. That is what it is. But you lose to Rice, who's a triple option team. You play an FCS team. Eastern Michigan does not have a dynamic offense. Marshall absolutely does not. And James Madison's the limited passing attack. They've allowed production to these teams. There should be a lot of success offensively for Southern Miss. And meanwhile, you can't really blame Louisiana offensively. They lost their quarterback immediately in the season, so they've been playing Lunch Winfield. He has a 48% completion percentage, 7.7 yards per attempt, 4 big-time throws, 1 turnover-worthy play, 1 interception. These numbers would be worse if it hadn't been for JMU falling down on defense, giving up bombs. He's not working with anything at receiver. They're dead last in the country in receiving efficiency, 136. This team is a good rushing team, 30th overall in rushing efficiency. But Zylan Perry's been banged up. We'll see if that's even enough. Southern Miss has a good defense. 9th in total efficiency, 25th in run defense, 10th in pass rush, 16th in coverage. They've also made some changes here. Penix is playing really well at corner. They played some quality offenses in SEC offense. App State's fine. Georgia Southern runs this particular style of air raid. They've answered the bell. We make this outside 3.5. This is one we'll play with confidence. Temple takes on Charlotte. This is a very greasy game overall, but here we go with Temple again. They're 11.5-point favorites, 47.5 total. We took an over in this game at 46.5. Pacing is quietly better than you'd think with Charlotte playing 43rd in pace. Temple's 111, so they're definitely not fast by any means. But this Charlotte team is an utter disaster, man. They've been giving up 1 million points in games, and it hasn't gotten much better. They lose to App State, give up 34, lose to North Carolina, beat Monmouth in a game where it was a complete shootout, 42-35. They lose to Rice 28-17. That's a triple option team. Gave up 54 against USF in a game with 8 turnovers. And then they lose to Army in their most recent game. The defense comes in 129th. They don't have a single unit ranked higher than 113th. So you parlay that against the Temple offense. Temple is not a bad offensive team. Evan Simon, for all his limitations, he's actually a pretty good game manager. You're not getting turnovers with him. He has 2 turnover-worthy plays in the year, 0 interceptions. He has taken 10 sacks, but the offensive line has gotten better. They're currently 41st in pass blocking, 9th in run blocking. The infrastructure is pretty good for this team. They're 51st in receiving, 72nd in rushing. The big thing with Temple is they're just not making a lot of mistakes on offense, so you get these long, methodical drives and the ability to score. With the 129th ranked defense on the other side, I think Temple is going to do just fine and more than their part towards a total in this game. So Charlotte playing fast definitely does not help either. Gives the opponents the chance to score a lot. Can Charlotte do enough? This is the biggest hesitation I have because Connor Harrell's out. They've been trying to start Zach Wilkie. That has gone okay. They've had spurts of really bad play from him. So they've had to play Grayson Loftus at times. That's been even worse. Wilkie at least has a 69% completion percentage, 6 yards per attempt, 2 big time throws, 1 turnover worthy play, and 1 pick. He's only taken 2 sacks. That's not the worst. And this team doesn't have bad receivers. They're 36th in receiving efficiency. The real problem is rushing. They haven't been able to run the ball whatsoever. And their offensive line is really bad. They're basically rotating every position. But Temple has some weaknesses on defense. They're 74th. They're a little weaker up front, 111th there, but you still have some problems in coverage for this team. They come in 46th. Their coach straight up lied to us, too. He said that we were going to see both their safeties return, and neither Javier Morton or Louis Fry played against Navy. So I wouldn't buy this team and their injury reports. They also didn't have Sekou Chroma on the edge. It's just kind of it's still a top sell for me with Charlotte, but we do show value on the over. Even with the backups in this game, I think you can play this through about 50. It's not going to get up there, but there is a little value towards the over here. Last one we're going to do, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State. I just don't understand this spread. I took it minus 20.5, 21.5. I thought it would move more, honestly. It's Cincinnati favored over Oklahoma State with a 58 total. Oklahoma State keeps losing guys. Cincinnati has no major injuries now that Dante Corleone is back, but the list goes on for Oklahoma State. We don't know who's playing quarterback yet. House Hejny's out. Zane Flores looks like he's going to be out. Josh Ford and Will Money at tight end. Casey Carpenter and Markel Samuel on the offensive line. Defensively, you have Jaleel Johnson, edge. Tajay McCoy, edge. Deshaun Brown, edge. Demarion Thomas, D tackle. Dylan Smith, defensive back. And we haven't seen Oklahoma State competitive in any game since Tulsa, a game they lost. They've been blown out 3 straight to Baylor, Arizona, and Houston. Meanwhile, Cincinnati's been on a warpath. They've won some close games, but they've done so against good teams. Kansas, Iowa State, and UCF. They just have significant advantages in this game. Brennan Sorsby has been playing lights out with a 63.5% completion, 9.4 yards per attempt, very good mobility. I've been amazed what they've gotten out of the receivers with players like Jeff Caldwell coming up from lower levels. And then the run game has been solid with Tawi Walker and Evan Pryor. The O-line is completely fine, 65th in pass blocking, 4th in run blocking. So then can Oklahoma State's defense stop this? The answer is almost certainly no. They've been better up front, 51st in run defense for what it's worth, but they are 127th in coverage and 98th overall. It's not even a matter of you can pick your poison against this team. I still don't really buy the run defense when it's all said and done. You look at some of the rushing attacks faced, they've been very limited this year. It seemed like Baylor's underachieved. Houston has struggled at times in the run game as well. So, sorry, there's always something with this apartment. Now they're cleaning out the dumpsters outside. Just can't get away from this gnarly city. Anyway, the real point in the game to mention is the Oklahoma State offense being a complete disaster. So they started Sam Jackson last week, who was originally a 4-star quarterback. He played so poorly early in his career that they converted him to wide receiver. He was back to quarterback, didn't go well. So you saw a glimpse of FCS transfer Noah Walters. I mean, the passing attack was non-existent. Their receivers are awful. They're 134th in receiving efficiency. They also can't run the ball. They're 102nd there. The offensive line is a mess. They're 116th in run blocking. They're rotating a lot of players on that unit. They dealt with multiple injuries. And Cincinnati's defense is 35th overall. They're 33rd in coverage, 20th in run defense. It is just a very tough ask for this team to score any points in the Cincinnati defense. So we'll lay the 21.5. We laid a 20.5. And that is where we will keep it for the week. So thank you guys for watching. I'm going to get out of here before they make more noise. If you ever have any requests, please let me know. Until next week, good luck, everyone. We will see you later.